going to start off with a question. How many of you have ever been to a restaurant? Say Chili's, Applebee's, Moonshriners, I don't know, whatever restaurant. And you look over and you see a family of 5, a mom, a dad, their 3 children. They're there having dinner. And all of them, all 5 of them, are either on their phone or a tablet. Like, they are there together. They are physically present, but they, at the same time, are so far away. Anybody ever seen that? And I can remember looking at that and thinking to myself, that will never be us. That will never be my family. We won't ever do that. We'll be different. But then this thing called life happens. Ever heard of it? Bills come due, they start stacking up. Problems at work. Problems at home. You're thinking of the things that you wish you would have done different in the past, and then how you're going to do things in the future. And those electronic devices, they quickly, before you know it, become pacifiers and coping mechanisms. I mean, I don't think any parent has a child and after they have a child say, I cannot wait for my cell phone to babysit my child. No, you get to a point where you're just like, I just need a break. Maybe it's just me, but I found myself there a time or two. And before long, you start looking around and you start noticing all the things that you've missed out on. That you were there, but you weren't really present. And I'm not saying that's everybody. I don't know. I know it's me. And if you figured out how to do that, I truly want to talk to you. I think there probably are people that have. Sometimes it is so difficult to be present. And you start thinking, man, I would do anything to get that moment back. To really see your spouse, to really hear your kids, to not miss that moment. I experienced it this past Thursday. My daughter, Kinsley, on Thursday, she turned 12. It went so fast. And I told her the day before, I said, I'm on shift that day. I got to work that day. And she said something to me. I haven't confirmed it. I haven't researched it, looked into it. But I don't think she's 100% accurate on this. But she said, you always have to work on my birthday. I think maybe she went a little too far with always. But I did this past time. And we're going to be taking her out to lunch today after church and celebrating her birthday. But I started that night, I was at the fire station. I started looking at pictures of Kinsley from when she was a baby, and her and I. And I got to some of these photos that I didn't remember. So either I wasn't there physically or I wasn't there mentally, but I had this, like, when was this? And I started thinking about it, and let me tell you, I love being a dad. And I love just about every moment of it. And as my kids are older, Addison, 22, Ada, and 17, Kinsley now 12, I love that I can sit with them, have conversations, joke with them. This may surprise you about my kids. They're very sarcastic. I love that. And I think about this often, like, they're going to be in my life as adults for way more years than they're going to be in my life as kids, hopefully. And I look forward to those conversations. I enjoy those conversations. But as I was looking through those pictures, I thought, man, what I wouldn't give to have 5 more minutes with my little Ken. And as I was looking through those pictures, I was remembering things that we would do. She would ask me to play dolls with her. And I would get on the floor and I would play, and of course she had to lead the whole narrative in it. I didn't get to be any part of the storytelling. But I remember playing with it, and it just like, what seemed like 10 minutes of playing Barbie felt like hours. And I remember laying down on the floor, and she'd have these coloring books of Disney princesses, and she would ask me to color, and we'd get the crayons out, and I would color them. And after about the 27th page of coloring, I remember thinking, I just want to be done coloring. And as I was thinking about this, and I think this is just a dad thing, just a parent thing, but I was like, man, I would give almost anything to be able to go back and color more pages. To play Barbie again. Those moments you start thinking about that. And I think about it with all my kids. I think about that with so many different things. Probably we all do. Am I alone on that? And then I think about those moments because, see, here's the thing. Have anybody ever been around a group of people and you felt like you couldn't be yourself around those people and you pretended to be somebody else to try to fit in for that moment? Because if you felt like if they knew who you were, like they wouldn't want to be around you. Anybody ever done that? Maybe at work, maybe at church, maybe around a group of people. Yeah. And afterwards, you feel terrible. Because anytime you try to be somebody that you're not and be somebody fake, you're going to feel terrible because you're not being you. But I would say that even those moments, when you were pretending to be somebody else, you were not actually present. Because here's the thing. You are the only you. And if you're trying to be somebody else, we already got them, and there is a void. Because, well, nobody's being you. But we can easily miss those moments. Which brings me to our story. Because in this story, well, at first glance, it kind of looks like it doesn't belong in the Bible. And by the way, there's several stories that look like that. If you ever read through them and saw them and pulled them out, there's some stories in the Bible that if we decided to get up here and preach them, you would be so offended you'd get up and leave, and we're just telling the story because there's some pretty crazy stuff. But in this story, it's one of those like, how did that even get in there at first glance? Because there's so many layers. Fun fact about the book of Esther. God is not mentioned one time. Now, in context, if one of us pastors got up here and did a whole sermon and we didn't do any scripture and we didn't talk about God and it was just, you would leave here going, what was that? But yet there's a whole book that made it into the Bible that doesn't mention God one time. No mention. They just say, hey, let's ask God. Or hey, but God really wouldn't like that. Not one what would Jesus do bracelet mentioned in the entire book of Esther. It's true. It's true. But there's layers. There's no burning bush, no parting sea, no voice from the clouds, just silence. And yet, it's one of the most divine stories we have because sometimes God doesn't show up in volume, he shows up in timing. And he shows up in silence. One of the things as a pastor that people come to me a lot of times and say is like, I don't feel God anymore. It's been a long time. I'm starting to wonder if there is even a God. I don't feel God. When God talks to me, and when we get down to it, they are relating feeling God to some moment where that was super emotional, super hyped up, and great moments. Not saying anything bad about those moments, but they got goosebumps, and now they associate any time that God's present or anytime God's around, they're supposed to get goosebumps. And when that happens, we totally miss what this is all about. Because sometimes he shows up in the silence. Now, in this story, there's this girl. And this girl's name is Hadassah. Great name, by the way. She's young. She's Jewish. She's an orphan. She's an immigrant. She's in exile. And we know, because when they describe her, she is beautiful. But at the same time, she's a nobody in the eyes of the empire. And she actually has two names. Hadassah, which is her real name, which is her Hebrew name, which means myrtle tree, which means renewal. But then she's taken into the palace, and they give her a new name, and it's Esther. That's her Persian name. And it becomes a disguise. It becomes a new identity. Because here's the thing. When you don't feel seen as who you are, and you feel like you are pushed away, and you feel like you're an outcast because, well, you try to be you, and it don't seem like anybody accepts that or anybody likes that. Oh, it's easy. It's easy to pick up a new identity and try to be somebody that you're not. And I find it ironic because Esther, it means star. And it means she shines. But here's the thing. At this point in the story, no, she doesn't. She's hiding who she is. She's hiding where she came from. And she's not shining at all. Very ironic. Now, there's this king. And his name is Xerxes. And he is the king of Persia. And he throws a party. Now, how many of you guys like throwing parties? Now, I'm not talking about like parties like where everybody's drinking and like everybody like, you know, I know we all have different ideas of parties. Like in the Lloyd household, a party is like getting around the table and playing Uno. And then after 10 minutes, it's time for bed. But, well, all right, Heath, you guys throw a party. How long, if you were going to throw a party and you were going to invite us, like, how long, how many hours would that party be in general? 4 to 6 hours. 46 hours? 4 to 6. 2 hours. All right. Well, King Xerxes has you topped because he throws a party that lasts 6 months. Obviously, the dude knows how to party. 6 months. All right? And pretty much in the entire book of Esther, King Xerxes is drunk, and he kind of presents himself as kind of a pushover. And he throws this party with all of his friends, and on the final day, after 6 months, on the final day, he's drunk, he's entitled, and he calls for his queen, who her name is Vashti. And he calls her in, and okay, here's the thing. I've heard preachers preach this message before and talk about Esther. I haven't, but I've heard them, and there's some parts they leave out, understandably so, or they sugarcoat them. And I've heard it talked as that King Xerxes calls his wife in there, the queen, to entertain his friends. But that's, I guess, in a way, but what he actually does is he calls her in there to entertain his friends wearing nothing but her crown. And I think we can use our imagination of what he was thinking. And Vashti looks him in the eyes, into the windows of his soul, and says, no. And you're like, good for her. But here's the thing. In that day, women didn't say no to men, especially the king. And his friends couldn't believe it. And they said, listen, if you let her get away with that, all the women over all of Persian Empire are going to start saying no to us men. And we can't have that. So what did King Xerxes do? He got rid of her. Into exile. Banished her. Put her in a tower. I don't know where she went, but she's gone. Just like that, she's gone. Because in the empire, there is no room for women who do not perform. So, the Persian Empire started this contest. We'll call it that. And maybe you could look at it as like the Persian Empire's version of The Bachelor. Although, a little twist, there was no cards, no roses, nothing romantic. What it was something that was violent and that exploited women. And see this girl, Esther, who most theologians believe she was somewhere in between the age of 13 and 16 during this time. That she didn't volunteer for this contest. None of the women did. What they were instructed to do is any beautiful woman that's out there in the empire, they would go into their house, take them, and bring them to the palace. So Esther did not sign up for this. She was taken. This girl that's her parents have died. She's being raised by her cousin. She's in exile. She has no rights, and now she's taken from her home to the palace. And they take her to what, I guess their version of a spa, but it lasted 12 months spa treatment, I guess. And they bathed her in oil and perfume, and she's prepared for a night with the king. Because this is how the king would decide. All the women that they brought to the palace, the king would, one by one, sleep with them, and then at the end decide which one is going to be the queen. So they get Esther all ready. They say, now tonight is your night. And what does Esther do? she goes. I find it interesting that already in the beginning of the story, at this point of the story, the person that this story is all about, the book's about her. Obviously, she's the hero in this story. But right now, she looks anything but a hero. I mean, the other queen, Vashti, she was able to say no. Esther, she couldn't do that. She went along with it. Why? Fear. It's usually why we go along with things that we know is not right, we shouldn't go along with. And the story, well, it starts off pretty messy. Because here's a girl 13 to 16, been pulled out of her house, and along with a lot of other girls, and forced to sleep with the king. And it's like, how? Like, where do you go from here? And then somehow, some way, Esther wins the contest. She is made queen. She becomes queen. Now, she doesn't tell the king who she is. She hides that she is Hebrew. She hides where she's come from. She is no longer who she used to be. She is Esther. And she's afraid to share who she really is, because in some empires, being you can be dangerous. And now there's this man, his name is Haman. And he is a power-hungry egomaniac with paper-thin temper. And somehow he convinces King Xerxes to promote him to elite status, and he has the ability to make a law where everybody in the empire has to bow to him, has to bow to Haman. And then there's this other dude who is Mordecai, and he's Esther's cousin. And by the way, it has to be one of the most awesome names in the world. Mordecai. If I thought I could get away with legally changing my name to Mordecai, and then you guys call me Pastor Mordecai, I would do it. But I am looking at y'all's faces, and I have a feeling you guys aren't on board. You are, okay. Graceness. And he tells Haman, no, I'm not going to bow. Not going to do it. Which is pretty much a death sentence. And Haman snaps. He throws a Persian temper tantrum. And he doesn't just want Mordecai to be gone. He wants every single Jew in the empire to pay for what Mordecai did, and he wants them all wiped out. And he casts lots, and he picks a day, and he goes to the king who is, again, through this whole thing, well, pretty much clueless. And he gets the king to sign a death sentence into law. That when this day comes, all of the Jewish people will be killed. So Mordecai, he sends word to his cousin, to Esther, and says, you have to say something. You're the only one that can say something. And Esther says, yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, hero. I don't think so. Why? Because she was afraid. And she said, if I go to the king without being summoned, I could die. And then Mordecai replies with a line that even today echoes all the way from the Persian Empire into this room. And we find it in Esther 4:14. At the end of that, verse, he says to her, "Who knows? But that you were brought to your royal position for such a time as this." And at that moment, at that very moment, something in Esther shifts. And she starts coming up with a plan. She fasts. She prays. We don't say who she prays to, but she prays. She makes peace with the risk. And she says these words: "If I perish, I perish." And with those words, the whole story begins to turn. And I feel like I need to pause right here. And if you guys could maybe dim the lights a little bit, I think before we go any farther, we got to call things like it is, and we got to kind of address the elephant in the room. Because on the outside, like just on the surface of this, there is no doubt that this story 100% degrades women. Like, if you hear this story and something inside of you doesn't sit right, well, that's what should happen. I believe that's what the writer intent to do when he or her writes this. But then if you stand back and look at the layers underneath, you'll find that in this story, these men who feel like they have the power and they hide under the crown and they live life from one drunken moment to another and thinking about nobody but themselves. These men who feel like they have, well, all the power, well, if you look at it, their insecurities are totally exposed. And we see that actually they don't have the power at all. And then you see these women, Vashti, who was bold enough to say no. Esther, who, yes, she said no. I mean, she wasn't bold enough to say no at first, but now, at this moment, she's wise enough to know when to say yes. Because, see, this story is about resistance. This story is about strategy. And this story is kind of like theological, Bible, kung fu ninja stuff going on, because it hits you slowly, because you think, oh yeah, it's about this, and I don't want to read that. I get offended because it degrades women and stuff. And then you see, oh, wait a minute. These women were strong enough and had wisdom enough to make a difference in what's going on. Because here's the thing. Yeah, the Persian Empire, pretty messed up if you research it. Did pretty messed up stuff. And at that time, they thought it was normal. Why wouldn't it be normal for the king to get to sleep with all the women that he wanted to? Why is it not normal for the king to have the queen come out and just her crown and entertain her friends? I don't know. That one I can't ever see anybody be like normal. But I mean, whatever. And maybe it was. And maybe it was accepted in the Persian Empire. But hear me. Just because something is accepted by the vast majority of people in your circle does not make it right. know how change is made? You know how things change? At some point, somebody says, I don't care if you like me or not. I don't care if you never talk to me or not. Because what's going on is wrong. And they stand up and say it. And eventually, maybe it didn't get through when they said it, but somebody else picked that up. And over time, there's enough voices where it becomes loud enough where change is made. Because the last time I looked, stuff that was going on back then is not acceptable now. Yeah, it was accepted back then, but it still wasn't right. Anytime, you want to know, how do I know what's right and what's not right? Anytime that you look at somebody else, no matter their beliefs, where they came from, who they was, a person, a human being, and you look at them and think, I'm better than them, you are wrong. This is a kingdom subversion wrapped in silence and lipstick, and this is what happens when a woman knows that who she is and chooses her moment. Now, anybody that knows me, there's no question, I am a huge advocate for women leaders, because I think when we don't have women leaders, we are holding ourselves to, we only are getting 50% of what God has for us. And I get it. I'm not here to try to make everybody agree with me or believe what I believe. If that's my goal, I might as well hang it up. But maybe the real story here is not just what happened back then, but it's what's happening right now. Because this story doesn't just live on these pages. This story lives inside you and inside me. And some of us, we've been hiding for so long, and we've been afraid to show our true selves because of what may happen. What people will say. Like, what if I told somebody what I really think? What if I told somebody what I really believe? What if I said what I was really thinking? Well, I would lose friends. I may lose position. I mean, and I think I probably is safe to say that none of us here, any of us, live in a palace. Right? Except maybe Steve Rodriguez. It might be the only one. But we all have our palaces. We all have our positions that we get comfortable in. And like, if I stood up and said this isn't right, I would lose something. Yeah, that's how it works. You realize the whole Gospels about our Savior, about God putting on skin and bones and bringing himself to a level to show us the heart of the Father, and was crucified. Yet we're so worried about, is people going to like me? Are they talking about me? Who cares? We get so wrapped up in this stuff. And some of us, well, we've grown quiet, not because we have no voice, but because the risk feels too real. And let's be honest, it's hard enough to speak up and defend ourselves at times, right? But how hard is it to stand up and speak up when others are being treated wrong and you have nothing to gain, only to lose? Because see here, check this out. Esther, she already made it. The safest option for her, sit still. She has the power. She has the crown. But see, this story takes us to a place that's deeper. It takes us to a place of love. It takes us to a place of sacrifice. It takes us to a place of knowing who we are and who we're not. She had comfort, yet she still risked it all. Not for position, not for power, but for people. And here's the thing. I've heard this message spoke on before, and people talk about it. And maybe I missed it. I don't know. But a lot of times we're like, well, she did this because it's for her people, for the Jewish people. And she was Jewish. I don't buy that. She was stripped out of that culture. She knew nothing about that. From the age of 13 or 16, she lived in the palace as a queen. Oh, and the Jewish people? They wouldn't have looked at her and thought her as one of theirs. Because she has disobeyed and gone against so many things in the Torah. She's married somebody that's not Jewish. She's living in a place with Persian idols. She's eating food that is not kosher and is not clean. Because why do I know that? I researched it, and the Persian Empire made sure that they didn't eat. That's about the only thing they didn't eat, is things that would have been considered clean. And make no mistake, those people that she was standing up for and saying, this is not right, and risking her life for, no question in my mind, they would have not done the same for her. So often we think, what are we going to get out of this? What is this going to do for me? And then when we stand up for somebody or we do something for somebody, we get so upset when they don't do the same thing. If that's why you're doing it, well, you just not do it. You don't stand up for those people because they're her people or because they would do the same for her or that she felt that closeness to it. She did it because it was what's right. And maybe that's the invitation for each and every one of us today. To be more honest about who we are. To stop hiding parts of ourselves that we do just so that people feel comfortable. And don't get me wrong, timing is one thing to stand up for people, it's another to say, this is how I am, just accept it and then treat others like in a way that you wouldn't want to be treated. But maybe this is an invitation for us to use our voice. Not for clout, not for approval, but to stand up for something and someone that are more vulnerable than you are. To stand up for those that, they don't really have a voice because of the situation they're in. And we sit back so many times thinking, man, I'm so glad I'm not in that situation. Oh, but you could be. And I guarantee you, you're in the situation that you are because at some point, sometime in your life, somebody stood up for you. Matter of fact, the whole reason we're here is because someone stood up for us, gave his life for us. But you, whether you know it or not, you have been placed in the position that you are. And maybe right now, the only word that could describe it is, it sucks. Like, you're around people that make you feel less than, or maybe you're around in a situation. Maybe you are. Maybe you're in a place where it's just like, get me out of this. But can I just say this? Maybe you're there for a reason. Maybe God has positioned you where you're at for a reason. Because right now, each and every one of us, we are in a position and we're given a voice. And maybe you didn't ask for it. Not all of it anyways. But here you are. And maybe God's not shouting. Maybe he's just waiting. Waiting to see if you're going to step forward. Not with all the answers. Not with a guaranteed outcome. Just with courage. Just with faith. Just with a trembling, holy yes. See, Esther, she didn't see the miracle before she stepped forward. But because she stepped forward, she became the miracle. And some of us are sitting back waiting for that sign. Waiting for that moment. Waiting for that title. No, you're where you're at. For a reason. She stepped up and became the miracle, and so can you. Because right here, right now, see, that's your moment. Right here. Stop waiting. Oh, my moment's going to be one day. No, it's right now. There's people that you can stand up for right now. There's people in being treated terribly and in situations where you can make a difference right now. But we don't do it because we're what people think. Maybe this is your moment. And just to give you guys a little inside information on this, last time I spoke, we put this star up as a guiding light, as direction of God guiding us. It's no accident that now we got another one. And by the way, next time I speak, there's going to be a third one, and then probably a fourth one. Just kind of throwing out there, and they are separate messages, but they also go together. And so maybe this is the point of this constellation. This is the turning. This is the yes. This is you. You, my friend, are made for such a time as this. You. Right now. But you don't know what all I've done. Did you not just hear the story of Esther and what all she went through? And no, right now, maybe this is your moment. Maybe this is your time. So my friends and family of Fairlawn, I love you so much, and this is my prayer over all of you. May you refuse to believe the lie that your presence does not matter. Because it does, more than you know. And may you find yourself not chasing the next big thing, but standing right where you are and saying, if I perish, I perish. But I will not miss this moment. Because maybe, just maybe, you were made for such a time as this. Grace and peace. I love you.